You've been here in Watchet 18 years, and I came down here first about 8 years ago and started to talk to you about this building without any sense of how long this building would take. But one of the things I felt quite early on was this was the most ambitious project I'd ever been involved with from a social perspective, and what it could mean for this town. So tell me how you conceived of what this building could do for this place and what it should do and how you went about it.
So I don't even think that we thought it was ambitious. It just seemed the only thing that could happen. So we spent a group of friends week on week in the pub drinking cider, talk about what should happen in this place. And this particular piece of land was owned by the council, and a developer was going to develop 80 flats on the site. And when it became clear that that was going to fall through, it seemed really obvious to us that it shouldn't be flats that would be owned as second homes. It should be something that would benefit the community and make this place even better. So our conversations of a Thursday evening around cider was about what that should be. And as we talked about it, more and more people got involved. And then eventually we got bored of ourselves and were like, we should just do it. And it didn't seem to us at the time particularly ambitious. It just seemed like no one else is going to do this thing. The council want to build more flats. Let's not do that. Let's put a company together. Let's see what happens. Let's get some money. Let's talk to the community. Let's find out what's needed.
Well, it was very specifically a community interest company, non-profit, designed to bring about change.
Exactly. So our understanding of really what that meant evolved as we got going. And so in the early days, we got some money to run town-wide consultations, asking what does Watchet need. So it wasn't so much about what do you want, it was about what does this town need for the future. And we had conversations everywhere we could, so school fetes, football club, the Legion, British Legion, and we had kind of public, called them community conversations, because consultations makes everyone die inside a little bit.
It's also kind of patronising.
It's really patronising. So it was more about let's have a conversation about this and let's talk about it. And that's how they were organised. It was a way in which getting every single person who was there to say what they thought and what they were afraid of and what they really hoped for and what the best kind of future that they could imagine looked like.
What did it look like?
It often looked quite similar.
Did it look like that?
Well, people didn't. It was more of about emotion. So people wanted vibrancy, and they wanted activity, and they wanted fun, and they wanted playfulness, and they wanted it to feel somewhere that they would be welcome, and that crucially, I think, celebrated our today. So people really wanted to be proud of today and look to the future. So I think that's where contemporary architecture is really important.
Because I came down and was asked just to talk to you about the project, and I was given a loose brief that was a very conceptual brief, and one of the things that it said was that you wanted something offbeat, and also you said you wanted something that reflected this place. And it's interesting that early on we didn't really know what type of building we were doing or even quite where it would go.
What was particularly in it.
What was in it. And over several years that evolved, didn't it?
Yeah.
Through your work, which was a series of workshops that we presented back to the community, initial ideas that were quite kind of conceptual. I mean, big towers, all sorts of things,
Yeah, and I think even then, so it's 8 years ago, and the whole world's changed in 8 years, but even then we knew that this is a time of real problems. There's a lot of problems going on, especially in coastal towns, but particularly globally. We have all these difficulties, and what can happen, how can architecture and what happens inside a building kind of change that, help it. And so the conversations that we had were about that, like what is it that needs to change in a place that's going to make somewhere really flourish? And the answer seemed to be activity, imagination, creativity, buzz, food, music, dancing.
But actually, this part of West Somerset has a tradition of those kind of things. And you look at, Weston-super-Mare, Clevedon-Pier, Burnham-on-Sea, whatever else. I mean, this is a place of kind of recreation and imagination. You go to the seaside to imagine a different world in a way, and this is no different. And and actually, I think this place is very quirky and unusual. And from our point of view, working as architects, I mean, I think we worked through several schemes, you might remember, and when we did this scheme, in fact, I found the initial sketch the other day. When we did this, it came incredibly quickly because we've been working here for like 5 years by that point. And it just kind of made sense because, really, this town is a plinth with little buildings on top of it. I mean, if you look at those sheds there, that is the building. And then if you look above it, the little quirky ad hoc bay windows popping out. I love all this stuff. I love Clevedon-Pier, but I also love this stuff, the kind of ad hoc improvised. But I also thought that they're never going to get the money. This is like, then we're talking however many, and now it's grown slightly, and so I loved the idea of designing something that would always have work being carried out. It was part of the language of the dockside, part of the language of this place, was that it would continue to evolve. And I thought that we might build a plinth, and then over time we'd kind of build those little things, and they would gradually accumulate on top and never stop accumulating. And I actually like the idea that you could add a few more things now. But remind me what happened when we presented this back in this incarnation to the town.
Because there's been a few previous incarnations.
That's right.
So the first time
that was pushed back against the hill, against the bank, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we have changed. So we've taken it out to the community in terms of these community conversations 5 times. So we had almost every year. We had this is how we're thinking now, and we talk about it, and then more often than not, what happens when you have these community conversations is that you're talking to people who have lived here all their lives, and they know what works and what doesn't work, and they've seen things before, and they've seen the things that have failed, and that all came into the conversation. So it was really clear what needed to change and what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. So without those community conversations, it would have been a kind of hollow and empty building that wouldn't have worked.
But without the thoroughness also of your extraordinary business plan that demonstrated that there was a need for all of this accommodation, and critically that it would generate 37 jobs immediately, 150 jobs in the wider Watchet context. There would be a physical territory within a certain radius that it would affect. I mean, that was unbelievably thorough. I mean, I spoke to one of the funders, and she told me it was the most thorough funding application she'd ever seen. I mean, it was just like bang, bang, bang. This is what it's going to do. So in a way, the building was easy because if you walk around Watchet, this is a little piece of Watchet. I mean, Watchet is a really good quality pedestrian public realm with ad hoc buildings on it that you could walk around. And the building. The other thing I think what was really interesting is the site, curiously, is quite challenging. I mean, it is separate from the town, but it needed to link into this sense of being able to wander around. So as you know, the early conversations weren't around what the building was like. It was how can we connect into the coastal path? The answer was with the bridge that takes you over there and brings people in. How can we connect it to the esplanade? And how can we invite people to walk around a promenade in the kind of sense that they do at Clevedon-Pier? But instead of just going and looking at the sea, here you wander around this first floor piece of public realm that I think is the greatest gift that you've given to the town, that first floor street that's 2.5 metres wide or 4 metres wide in places. People can walk around a pedestrian street looking at artists working, buying art, that kind of stuff, before going up to, a series of quirky, I mean, you call them pods, I call them holiday cottages, which they are, that look over this fantastic place, that kind of reflect it back at itself, And so I guess looking at this now, 8 years on, or in a way, 18 years on in your case, what do you see here?
So what I'm really excited about is that I think what we've managed to create is the sense of a town or a village in itself. So we've extended Watchet, we've taken what's amazing about Watchet, so the public space that you can explore, the buildings that feel like they've been added to each other, the kind of little hidden places. Whenever you go to a new place, there's always courtyards that you just find anew, and we've got that here. But also what's happened is that from living here, we know so there's about 190 different community groups here, all doing loads of different things and all adding to the vibrancy and the reason to come here. And what we're doing is recreating that in East Quay. So there's all of these different artists doing all of these different things. There'll be community groups, there'll be education, there'll be school groups, there'll be musicians, there'll be theatre. So it's kind of just continuing the buzz that already exists in Watchet and allowing it into a new space where it can really flourish and more can happen. So really what we're trying to do is take the best of what is Watchet and put it into a new building and expand it.
I mean, that's really interesting to hear, because I see a place that wouldn't have benefited from a building that was incredibly precious and fixed and designed in the way that many architects conceive of buildings, which is something that's incredibly beautifully detailed, which might be very nice, but it wouldn't have given anything to this place. It needed to be a kind of loose building that could take change, could take, things being added to it, could take the accumulation of real life, layer over layer over layer over time, and not get worse, get better and better and better.
Yeah.
And for me, this is kind of post-architecture, and I've spent a long time designing buildings in some ways that are quite precious in their detail. And in a way, I've kind of been weaning myself off that for many years with the buildings that I've been doing, particularly for myself in the woods and my own studio, which you've been to. And often I've been asked, what does it mean to upscale that stuff? How do you upscale that way of working where you design a loose fit system that other people can fill in the gaps? And for me, finally, at however old I am, this is the building that does that for me. It has done everything that I've been trying to do in a way for 20 years, and it's like, where do I go now? What do I do next? It's like, how can I do something that's as interesting as that way of working? Because, I get another commission to design a building with some kind of nice details. I'm like, that's not very interesting. So let's do another project.
Well, yeah, let's do it. And the thing I really love about it is that it's kind of been built and it's owned by so many different people.
Exactly.
So when we were trying to write a list of who to thank, it's like, oh my God, it's like 300 people.
I know.
Because so many, it's like a whole ecology in itself.
Amazing.
So many people have been involved in the design, but also
delivery,
the kind of the internal fit out, it's just this whole, and it goes out in the same way that a town or a village does.
Of course. It had to be multiple hands, because otherwise it wouldn't have been true to this place.
It wouldn't have been true. And for us, that's exactly what's interesting about systems change and how we should think about the future, that it's about an ecology and that there's no kind of central ego.
No, there isn't, because, and I have to be honest, I've had to address that, because, architects are used to ownership and used to designing something and controlling it. And actually what I love about this is that it's had to force me to wean myself off that, because, the big picture was always the important story. And, this is a building where we work with another architect on the delivery, and actually, whilst on some senses that's quite difficult in terms of one's ego, it was fantastic to be able to trust that the building was designed in such a way that actually that could happen quite easily. And I love that somebody else much younger is coming in and doing all the interiors for the pods. And I love it that someone else might do something else. That's how towns and cities are,
Well, it's kind of, so obviously I'm a co-director of Onion Collective, and it's really what the Onion's all about. It's about the layers that matter, and if you take away the layers, there's nothing there in the middle. Nothing makes sense unless you've got the layers, and it's the same with East Quay, and it's the same with the whole concept of how it came together. It's the kind of sum of so many people's thinking and knowledge and expertise and experience and understanding that makes it what it is.
I love sitting here now listening to this work going on, because when I look over here, I showed a photograph of this to somebody, and she's like, I love it, and I'm not sure, is it finished? But actually it doesn't matter whether it's finished or not. And the sense of things happening, being made, the industry that we've talked about a lot is a really important part of this. I mean, it's never going to be finished in some ways, because I hope that the life that is kind of lived out, gets better and better and better. The more marks that people make, they spill out, they weld a bit of stuff and leave a bit of,
I can't wait for the artist to spill paint and grow climbers up the walls.
Well, that first bit of graffiti is fantastic. So, that's the building.